At a family reunion, my grandfather announced, "She's got heart, but not a legacy." The room laughed. I smiled, sat quietly, and over 2 decades quietly acquired controlling interest in every major family business. When I triggered a total sell-off, every building bearing our family name was renamed, every scholarship revoked, every investment destroyed. Future generations don't just lose the money, they live in the shadow of a last name that's become a whispered embarrassment. I was 17 when my grandfather stood up at the dinner table, during the Martin family reunion, and humiliated me in front of everyone. It was July 2001, Lexington, Kentucky. Hot, sticky, and loud. Our reunions were always big events. My grandfather, Harold Martin Sr., made it mandatory. People flew in from Florida, Chicago, San Diego. Everyone in the family showed up unless you were dead or in prison. My mom and I came alone that year. We always did. My dad, Harold's youngest son, died in a chemical plant explosion when I was 9. They buried him with a cheap wooden casket because the insurance didn't pay out, and no one from the family offered anything more than a sympathy card. My mom had to fight to get the car fixed just so she could drive to his funeral. But every 2 years, like clockwork, we got the invite to the reunion. We knew why. Image. Harold needed every branch of the tree there, even if he didn't care if some were rotting. So we went. That night, we were having dinner under a big white tent on the back lawn of Harold's estate. Fancy set-up white tablecloths, silverware that looked like it was made for kings, waiters in black vests. Harold stood up near the end of the meal, holding a glass of scotch in one hand and a cigar in the other. He tapped the rim of his glass with a fork. The clinking echoed through the tent, and everyone went quiet. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "Thinking about where this family's headed. We've got lawyers, CEOs, bankers, real estate kings. We've got legacy." People nodded. Smiles all around. Then he pointed at me. "She's got heart," he said. Pause. "But not a legacy." Laughter. Loud, mean, unfiltered. My cousin Greg spit his drink. My Aunt Lorraine smirked behind her wine glass. Even the waiters were trying not to look. I didn't flinch. I just smiled. A small, tight-lipped smile. I didn't even look at my mom, because I knew I'd lose it if I did. I sat there. I finished my plate. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. But that was the moment everything changed. That night, lying on the mattress in my grandfather's guest room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, jerky circles, I made myself a promise. One day, I'd make them regret every word. After high school, I got a scholarship to a small college in Michigan. It wasn't Harvard or Yale, so no one in my family cared. They didn't offer me help. They didn't send care packages or money. They didn't even ask what I was majoring in. That was fine. I worked nights at a motel, cleaned rooms on weekends, took online courses to finish faster. I majored in finance, then got a job right out of college with a commercial real estate firm in Toledo. It paid just enough to rent a studio and eat ramen 5 nights a week. I said yes to every project, stayed late every night, and slowly moved up. At 29, I moved to Chicago. By 32, I was managing portfolios worth millions. That's when I started looking into the family businesses. There were dozens. Martin Construction, Martin Textiles, Martin Logistics. Most were old school, family-run, bloated with cousins and in-laws drawing 6-figure salaries to do nothing. But they still made money. Not as much as they could, but enough. I found ways in. One company had a real estate portfolio they didn't know how to manage. Another had outdated machinery and rising debt. I came in with shell corporations and private investors, silent partners who didn't ask questions. I started buying pieces. Quietly. Carefully. 1% here. 5% there. It took me nearly 2 decades, but I did it. I worked my way into every boardroom, every balance sheet, every debt portfolio. And not one of them knew. It was my cousin Greg who handed me the final piece. The same cousin who laughed the hardest when Harold mocked me. Greg had taken over Martin Capital after his dad retired. He treated it like a playground. Fast cars, gambling, bad real estate deals. By the time he realized how deep in debt he was, it was too late. I had already bought the loans. When he defaulted, I triggered my rights. The contract was airtight. His shares transferred to me automatically. No court fight. No warning. And just like that, I had controlling interest in every major company under the Martin name. All legally. All quietly. The family didn't even realize what had happened until the board meetings got scheduled without them. They called emergency meetings. They tried to overturn my decisions. But they couldn't. Because I didn't just take control of the businesses. I took control of the family trust. Harold's trust. The one that funded the family foundation. The scholarships. The estates. The private schools. I was the executor now. I liquidated everything. Sold every company. Every asset. Every trademark. Martin Construction. Sold to a multinational firm. They renamed it within 3 months. Martin Capital. Shut down, absorbed, renamed. Every building that had the Martin name on it. Gone. The Martin Performing Arts Center. Renamed for a black jazz musician the board had once refused to honor. The Martin Scholarships. Cancelled. The Martin Family Foundation. Dissolved. The family estate in Lexington. Sold to a tech CEO who bulldozed the place. And built a glass mansion with no trace of us left. Within 6 months, the entire Martin legacy was erased from public life. The name still exists but only in old news articles and family photo albums. My Aunt Lorraine hired lawyers. My cousin Greg sent threats. My uncle called me a disgrace to the bloodline. I ignored all of them. Until my grandfather, 92 years old, and living in a retirement home in Florida, wrote me a letter. Handwritten. Said he never meant to hurt me. Said he was just joking. He asked me why I hated the family so much. I didn't respond, because it wasn't hate. It was justice. He died 6 months later. I didn't go to the funeral. They still carry the name, but it means nothing now. The trust funds are gone. The scholarships are gone. The businesses are gone. They tell their kids stories about the old days. But the kids will Google the name and find news stories about scandal, collapse, and lawsuits. They'll ask, what happened? And someone will have to tell them that once, a girl with no legacy decided she didn't want their money. She wanted the whole thing to burn. And she made it happen. It's funny how they started noticing me only after everything was gone. After I triggered the sell-offs and liquidated the assets, I stayed out of sight. I wasn't interested in the spotlight. That wasn't the point. But the Martin family couldn't let it go. They weren't just angry I had embarrassed them. Publicly. In their world, losing money was bad, but losing status was a death sentence. That's when things started getting ugly. A week after the last sale closed, I noticed something strange. A local paper in Kentucky published a piece claiming I had manipulated my way into power through deception and unethical practices. It called me a bitter outsider with a vendetta. I laughed the first time I read it, until the second article dropped, then a third. Then a fake website popped up, pretending to be an insider blog. It accused me of sleeping with former board members. Said I faked credentials. Accused me of stealing. It wasn't hard to figure out who was behind it. The writing reeked of Greg's desperation. He always was dramatic. I hired a private investigator. Within days, we had proof IP addresses, screenshots, fake LLCs tied to Greg and Aunt Lorraine's son Travis. I didn't sue. I let them stew in their lies. Then I sent a single email to every employer, partner, and investor still working with any of them. Attached were files, proof of the smear campaign, evidence of past tax fraud from Lorraine's fake nonprofit, old gambling debts Greg had tried to bury. I didn't even write a message, just hit send. Within 2 weeks, Lorraine was dropped from 2 charity boards. Greg's last consulting gig cut him loose. Travis lost his job. They called it cancel culture. Called it balance. A month later, I got wind that the family was trying to pin the collapse on one of the few decent people left, my cousin Nina. She was one of the youngest, only 25, just finishing grad school when all this hit. She wasn't involved in the businesses. She worked at a nonprofit helping low-income families find housing. But Nina's mom, Harold's eldest daughter, was scared. She thought if she handed over a scapegoat, the rest of the family could distance themselves from the disaster. They fed reporters lies that Nina had embezzled from the Martin Foundation, that she had mismanaged scholarship funds. They didn't care if it ruined her life. They just didn't want to take the fall. I met Nina for lunch in a quiet corner of Asheville. She cried when she told me. Said she didn't know who to trust anymore. I told her, "You can trust me." I called a friend, an old college roommate turned lawyer. We filed a lawsuit against the top 5 family members pushing the lie. Defamation, libel, and emotional distress. We had recordings, emails, and messages. They folded within a week. Nina walked away with a hefty settlement and her name cleared. But she also walked away from the family. For good. There was still one thing left. Something I hadn't touched yet. Harold's journals. When he died, they were sealed, locked up in a safe that went to my Uncle Martin Jr., the family historian. Rumor was Harold kept detailed notes about everything, his real business deals, the favors he pulled, the bribes he paid. I wanted those journals. Not to hurt anyone else. To understand. To know if he ever saw me as more than just the girl with heart. I made an offer. Martin Jr. refused. So I waited. 6 months later, his house in Scottsdale went into foreclosure. Quietly, through one of my holding companies, I bought the property at auction. The safe was still in the study. It took a locksmith 4 hours to crack it. The journals were there. 12 leather-bound books. I read every page. And what I found? It wasn't regret. It wasn't guilt. It was worse. Harold wrote about the family like they were pawns. Tools. Scores to settle. He pitted siblings against each other. Hid money. Lied to his own children about who would inherit what just to keep control. There was one mention of me. She's got more spine than the rest combined. But she'll never be one of us. He was right. I never wanted to be. After I read Harold's journals, something inside me settled. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even angry. I understood what I was dealing with. He never cared about building a family. He built a kingdom. And everyone in it was just a tool to help him stay king longer. But he made one mistake. He left a tool behind he didn't think was sharp enough to cut. Right when I thought it was overdone, dusted, I got a call from a former partner. Name was Eric Connolly. I hadn't talked to him in years. Not since we worked on a logistics acquisition together. He was polite but direct. "Listen," he said. "I got approached by someone in your family. They want to rebuild the Martin name, using your old acquisitions." I blinked. "They're trying to buy back the companies I sold." I asked. "Not just trying," he said. "They have new money. Overseas backers. Quiet. Aggressive." That shook me. Because most of what I had sold wasn't easy to piece back together. The names were gone, but some of the original staff, the frameworks, they still carried the DNA of the Martin Empire. If they rebuilt it, even under a different name, they could claim the legacy again. Not on my watch. I went digging. Turned out, Greg had partnered with a family out of the Middle East. Oil money. They didn't care about history. They cared about assets, and Greg sold them a pitch. "We'll rebuild the Martin companies. Strip away the drama. Make it clean." He used my track record to make his case. Called me a rogue insider who went too far, but created an undeniably efficient collapse ripe for reinvention. They were calling the new company Martech Holdings. Goo. I moved fast. The companies they were targeting were still fragile. New owners, new branding, still adjusting. I contacted each CEO. I laid out the truth. Then I made an offer. Not to stop the buyouts, but to outbid them. Quietly. Cleanly. One by one. 3 accepted in 10 days. 2 held out. I let them go. The rest, I brought back under a new holding group. But this time, not for revenge. This time, to protect the one thing the Martins never understood. You don't build a legacy by naming things after yourself. You build it by what you leave standing when you're gone. One night, I was closing up a file when my phone rang. No caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. Later I listened. It was a woman's voice. Calm. Firm. "Miss Martin," she said. "We represent a private family office interested in your history. We'd like to discuss a merger. But also a correction. Some stories are best not left in the light." It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. They weren't just trying to rebuild the family name. They wanted to rewrite what I did. Make it disappear. And they weren't going to stop. That voicemail didn't scare me. But it told me one thing loud and clear. They weren't just trying to rebuild the name. They were trying to erase me from the story. And I couldn't let that happen. They called again 2 days later. This time it was a man. Said his name was Walter. Smooth voice like he'd been practicing it for years. Said they were willing to bring me in if I played nice. They'd give me a seat on the new board. A cut of profits. My name on a few plaques, quiet ones. We can shape the legacy together, he said. I said no. They didn't take it well. Over the next month, strange things happened. My email was hacked. 2 old tax audits were reopened. I lost 2 clients in 1 week due to reputation concerns. A photo of me at a college party, nothing illegal. Just dumb, got leaked online. They were playing dirty. But I was ready. I had spent 20 years building my own network. Not just buying companies. I had allies. People who trusted me. People who owed me. And I had something they didn't. The journals. I scanned all 12 volumes. Uploaded them to a private server. Gave 3 people keys. If anything happened to me, anything at all, the whole thing would go public.
Harold's corruption.
His backdoor deals. His threats to competitors. His payoffs to city officials. The bribes, the lies, the abuse. Not just embarrassing. Criminal. I sent a message to Walter. Try me. The calls stopped. The smear jobs vanished. But I wasn't done yet. I flew to Atlanta, where Martech Holdings had rented a floor in a fancy new building. Greg was there. So was Lorraine. A few other familiar faces. They didn't know I was coming. I walked into their meeting uninvited, carrying one of Harold's journals. Slapped it down on the table. Greg looked up pale. Still trying to burn everything, he said. No, I said. I already did. I'm just here to make sure no one builds a house on the ashes. They didn't speak. I opened the journal to a page marked in red. Want me to read what Harold wrote about you, Greg? He turned red. Then white. I didn't need to read it. I just needed them to know I could. I'll be watching, I said, then walked out. That was the last time I saw them. It's been 2 years. Martech failed. Investors backed out. Lawsuits from former employees started piling up. Turns out legacy doesn't mean much when your foundation is rotten. The Martin name is nothing now. Not even a warning. Just a punchline. People say revenge is about rage. About fire. But for me it was always about memory. About making sure they remembered that the girl they laughed at was the one who finished them. And yeah, maybe I made mistakes too. I let it consume me. I lost people along the way. Friends. Opportunities. Relationships. I held the anger so long it started to feel normal. But I don't regret it. Not for 1 second. Because now when people say the name Martin, they don't think of power. They think of the girl who took it all away and made damn sure they could never get it back. And that is a legacy no one can erase.